municipality proposal, and the floor is yours, virtually.
Thank you. And I trust you can see the PowerPoint there.
We can?
The Thompson River.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for having us present. Yeah, as Mayor Roden introduced, Colleen Hoogan, she's our invasive plant management coordinator. She is on, will be participating in this presentation as well. And I know Mike Deedles is, but we'll be talking about him and his program through our presentation as well. So I thought I'd introduce him as well. So both Colleen and Mike Deedles are invasive plant coordinators with the TNRD, and throughout these presentations you'll kind of get a sense of how their roles differ. So without further ado, I can get my presentation moving here. So what this presentation that you have in front of you, or that I'm going to share, is basically a summary, I guess, if you will, with the proposal that's in your agenda package. So feel free to follow along with that, and I'm hoping to sort of clarify and answer any questions that have come out of that proposal. So I think I'll clarify right up front what it is that we're proposing. So what the proposal is, it's an opportunity for TNRD member municipalities to join the invasive plant regional service. So what that would mean is that the service establishment bylaw within the TNRD would be amended to add those municipalities that are interested in joining, and then they would become part of the service and receive the benefits of being part of that service. And what I think you'll see from this presentation is that's going to help and improve invasive plant control region-wide and also within municipalities. What this proposal is not, to clarify, it's not a request for any one-off funding or anything like that. It's an opportunity for municipalities to join the program if they wish to receive those benefits. All 11 member municipalities have received the same proposal that's in front of you, and we have presented to 3 of them so far, and we have at least 4 more presentations after you guys locked in. So we anticipate to present to all the councils over the next month or 2. So what is the concern with invasive plants? Well, the main one is that weeds don't follow boundaries on a map. So unfortunately, the weed issues that are in the surrounding electoral area there don't stop when they see the Ashcraft municipal sign. What we're seeing is more and more invasive plant issues in urban and semi-urban areas. And we're also finding that over the number of years now, there's more landowners within municipalities calling Colleen specifically, asking for help, whether it be identifying weeds or how to treat weeds in their properties. And we're having to tell them that they don't qualify for assistance within the TNRD program because they work in municipal boundaries and they're not part of the service area. We're also finding that more and more that we're assisting municipal staff who don't have the knowledge or expertise to manage weeds on city-owned land. So I'm going to actually pause there. I'm going to explain a little bit more about how the TNRD invasive plant program works and explain the costing model that we're proposing. But before that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen, and she's going to talk a little bit more about specific invasive plants that are of concern in the Ashcraft area.
Yeah, great, thanks Jamie. So for those of you that don't know what invasive plants are, they're non-native plant species whose introduction can cause harm to the economy, environment, or society. So next slide. So I want to share a few stats with you before we get started. The first one is that there's about 850 alien plant species established in the province, and over 175 of those are known to be invasive and occur at more than 117,000 locations across the province. So the issue is quite widespread. In 2009, there was an economic impacts of invasive species report in BC for invasive plants. It was estimated that damages resulting from invasive plant impacts was to be about $139 million by 2020, There has been a follow-up impact assessment done, but I'm guessing that we're pretty well close to 140 million in damages. So the threat's really quite real, and land managers across our region, our province, and across the country are actively managing invasive plants. So with that said, I want to take the next few minutes to talk about invasive plant issues in and around Ashcraft and the potential impacts to the village of Ashcraft. Next slide, Jamie. So the first example I want to highlight is Japanese knotweed. So this plant is present in our region. It's not super widespread right now. It's kind of localized itself into municipalities, mostly because it's a horticultural plant. So people are purchasing it, they're trading and selling it through horticultural activities, and you're going to quite often find them growing in people's backyards. The plant resembles bamboo, so it's got a hollow stem. It can grow up to 10 meters or 10 feet tall. The issue with this plant is its root. Tough. So Jamie, if you want to advance to some more photos, we just pull them all up on the screen. Great. The roots can penetrate really hard materials such as asphalt, concrete, and has potential to damage public services and infrastructure, home foundations, sidewalks, and more. The knotweeds are quite prevalent in the UK. So I read some information about property values in the United Kingdom, and it can decrease property values up to 15%, and quite often mortgages are now getting denied for still purchasing homes that have knotweed on their property, and insurance is unavailable. To bring the situation closer to home, there was an instance in Clearwater just a few years ago where plants were growing on a private property up there, and the roots actually penetrated the septic system. So you can imagine these private landowners wondering what's going on with their septic, and they dig into the issue and find a whole bunch of roots penetrating the system and the pipes. So that was a really big financial burden on that private landowner, not only to manage the knotweed, but to repair their septic. So in addition to impacts on infrastructure, there's lots of impacts on our natural ecosystems as well. So Jamie, if you just want to go back to the previous slide, there's a photo on the bottom left, and it shows a situation in the lower mainland where riparian areas become invaded by knotweed. And you can see up in the corner there's a picture of a happy beaver. So this beaver who used to specialize on trees is now specializing on knotweed to make dams. And this is really, really bad because, as mentioned, it takes 0.7 grams of a piece of root or shoot tissue of this plant to grow a new plant. So all these fragments are flowing downstream and establishing further downstream, which isn't great because knotweeds lack true hairs that are required to hold soil together, which means along riparian areas they cause increased erosion and sedimentation into watercourses, which in itself has impacts on local flora and fauna. Okay, advance please. So I did a little sleuthing around Ashcraft on the provincial invasive plant database, and there is Japanese and giant knotweed reported to be within the municipality, or within the village of Ashcroft. So it's on Barnes Road, and it does look like it's on private land. And it's a bit concerning because, as you can see, it's pretty close to the South Thompson River, and it'd be really detrimental for any of those plants, seeds or fragments to get into the watercourse and do its damage. So I'm not sure if there's been a really good inventory of knotweeds in the village, but you could probably start keeping your eyes open in people's yards for this plant to be popping up. Next slide. Okay, so the next plant here, and I know it's a nemesis of our Director Roden, is the Tree of Heaven. So it originally comes from China, and it was first introduced to North America in the late 1700s. So it's also known as Chinese or stinking sumac. And all parts of the trees, especially the leaves and flowers, have a nutty or a burnt nut smell to them. It's very aggressive. It can produce as many as 325,000 seeds per year. And it produces numerous suckers from roots, and they resprout vigorously from cut stumps and root fragments. So they commonly grow in urban areas, and it sprouts up just about anywhere. So similar to knotweeds, it's in alleys, sidewalks, parking lots, and streets. In rural areas, you can see it growing in fields along roadsides, lake shores, and forest edges. So because of the rapid growth of this tree, it can displace and outcompete native vegetation, forming dense thickets. It can prevent establishment of desirable plant species, and similar to knotweed, the root system of the tree of heaven can also cause damage to sewers and foundation. And you can see there that I have a picture of it actually going through the foundation of a building. So I believe there is an infestation in Ashcraft, and the one I'm aware of is on Tingley Street. And I think the village has been trying to control it over the past few years. So I know it's a really great concern, and we have the ability to put species on our new invaders list. So I don't think the tree of heaven is widespread throughout the TNRD just yet. So it would be really great for private landowners to have that option to have it treated if it does show up on their properties. So next slide, Jamie. Another plant I want to bring to your attention is Horiolisum, and it's a plant that belongs to the mustard family, and it's really spreading like wildfire. Throughout the TNRD. The concern with this plant is that it's toxic to livestock, particularly horses. The plant's pretty much, horses will choose not to eat it in a standing pasture or field, but what happens is it gets dried up and bound in hay, and that's where it does its damage to horses because they inadvertently consume it. So I have a picture down below about, it's a hay field down in Chase. So you can see one side of the field's been hay, and it's not always green. You can imagine what's in those hay bales, and it's probably full of Horiolisum. And the story I heard about this is that these bales went down to the Lower Mainland for sale, and the person who was purchasing them told the seller to turn around and bring them back and burn them. So it really does impact the sales of hay for folks and their animals as well. So I had a peek around again on our database, and it looks like this plant is present kind of in the Cornwall Creek area, which is to the west part of your of the village. So next slide, please, Jamie. So the final plant I want to highlight is giant hogweed. This plant isn't in our region yet that we're aware of, but it is very close. So it is in the Fraser Valley, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Ashcraft. I should say the plant produces highly toxic sap that can cause burns, blisters, and scarring if you touch it. And I've seen photos of people with third-degree burns and having to spend numerous nights in the hospital with exposure to this plant. It's so bad that Work Safety issued a toxic plant warning for giant hogweed, requiring workers to wear heavy water-resistant gloves and all their PPE when they're dealing with it. And it could become a really big public safety concern if this plant was to establish in Ashcraft. So for those instances, if it did establish, it would really be great to have those resources and tools available to get rid of it before it spreads. So these are just a few of the invasive plants in and around the village of Ashcraft. And yeah, I hope you learned something, and I'm going to pass it back over to Jamie to talk a bit more about our services.
Okay, thanks, Colleen. So her job was basically to scare you. So of the concerns that we have, just a few examples. And I guess I will say right off the bat is, unfortunately, I'm not going to tell you we can solve all these problems and prevent these plants from ever establishing or get rid of them immediately if we find them. But we do have a long-standing program at the TNRD that's been fighting the good fight against invasive plants now for going on. Our original invasive plant service was one of the first services established by the TNRD, so it's been in place for 50 years now. So what it involves is 3 components that I'm just gonna highlight really quickly just to give you a sense of what we do and what we don't do. So the Landowner Assistance program, I'll talk about in more detail. That's kind of the big chunk of our program and where most of the finances are directed to. We also talk about the regional coordination role that Colleen does and the education outreach program that we have. So Landowner Assistance, what that is for the biggest part is financial assistance. So in the last year, over $100,000 in rebates was paid out directly to landowners. So the way this program works is depending on what invasive plant species a landowner has in their property, they can qualify for either 50% rebate or 100% rebate towards the treatment of that plant. So the idea is they hire a qualified invasive plant specialist to come and treat the weeds, and they submit the proper paperwork and the receipt, and we issue them a rebate for half or the full amount. We also have equipment, so this is geared towards people who are comfortable already, using herbicides to do invasive plant treatment, but they can borrow equipment free of charge, either seeding equipment or spraying equipment for doing treatment on their own land. We also assist landowners directly with our staff, our contract partners. Species, but don't know if it's that species or not, or they're trying to get they might be a new property owner trying to get a sense of putting a weed treatment plan in place, those sort of things. And Colleen or other staff can come out and assist the landowners in developing a plan. And we also have a biological control program, and that's where we literally go out and collect insects that the province has previously released that are natural predators to invasive plants, and we redistribute populations of those insects onto select invasive species. So I will clarify that definitely not all invasive plants have insects available that battle them, but there is a invasive species that we can use. So the regional coordination function, so that was the Landowner Assistance program. The regional coordination function is the Thompson Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee, which Mayor Roden is actually a part of, a member on that committee. So the idea of that committee is to act as a regional coordinator for all the different organizations and land managers within the TNRD doing weed control. So provincial agencies, First Nations, municipalities, forestry groups. We're trying to get everyone, and they're not all necessarily on the committee, but we're trying to coordinate everyone and get an idea sharing where people are treating that sort of role. We're really trying to make sure that the kind of best bang for your buck and coordinated approach to weed management is happening within the TNRD. So part of the regional coordination is Colleen's role as kind of a regional invasive plant expert. So she could maybe choose, for example, an industry partner who is developing invasive plant program. For example, Colleen could reach out to them and work with them on that. And finally, education and outreach. So we have an ongoing program. Hopefully you've seen it in one capacity or another. Media, so it's just social media, radio, TV, newspapers, school presentations. Obviously the pre-COVID days, we've been at public events, community gatherings, participated in like CD Sunday, CD Saturday events, farmers markets, that sort of thing. And so the idea there is to sort of people need to know that there's an invasive plant on the property and what the concern is before they even think about treating it. So that's why education is key. So that's the service in a nutshell. So what's it going to cost? So our current model is majority of the program is funded through taxation. So the current model is all 10 electoral areas pay to the tune of about $350,000 per year from taxation. And then, again, depending on the year, but usually receive about $50,000 a year in provincial grant funding. But I should clarify that provincial grant funding has strings attached, so that only goes to the regional coordination and education function. The Landowner Assistance program is 100% funded by the electoral area taxation. So that's why I mentioned earlier that sometimes we get calls from landowners within municipalities who want to take advantage of a rebate, but we have to tell them they don't qualify because they don't pay into the service. So what we've done for figuring out the proposal that's in front of you is what the incremental cost would be of adding municipalities. So we've looked at the increased budget for the Landowner Assistance Program, how many more rebates might we pay out, and what kind of increased staff time to administer and coordinate all aspects of the program. Now, we quickly realized that we couldn't propose a conventional model where the taxation is based on converted assessed value. So for example, the library service is a region-wide service that all municipalities, all electoral areas pay into, and the amount that each municipality pays in is based on converted assessment. When that's the case, then municipalities, because they have the bigger population, more assessment, end up paying the large portion of the service cost. Now we realize the invasive plants service is still, by and large, was developed and will assist the rural landowners, but what we're suggesting here is that municipalities will also benefit from this. So the model we've come up with is grouping the municipalities based on population size, and came up with a percentage, a maximum percentage of the total budget that they would contribute to the service. So it ends up still being the lion's share of the total cost of the service is paid for by those rural electoral areas, but a small portion is paid for by the municipality. So this table that I have up on the screen here, you don't need to madly scribble those numbers down, is also in the proposal in front of you. So Ashcraft falls into that population 1,000, 5,000 range, and our starting estimate would be $10,000 contribution, but the maximum budget set at 2.5% of the total invasive plant budget. So what that would mean is if we found, for example, there was new infestations of new plants and we found there was more demand for rebates and we increased the total budget for the service for those rebates, then all the contributors' percentage would increase, or the amount they contribute might increase, but we would ensure the calculation, the percentage that's contributed by each of those municipalities wouldn't exceed the percentage in this table here. So the intent would be this table, the percentages would go right into the service establishment bylaw for municipalities that will opt in. So I guess just in summary, the benefits to the Village of Ashcroft in joining would be stable long-term invasive plant management programs within the village, financial assistance for residents managing invasive plants on their own property, support for municipal staff managing invasive plants on public land, enhanced coordinated effort to control invasive plants throughout the region. You'd be able to increase education and outreach and awareness within your municipality, and protect land values from impacts of invasive plants. And quickly before Mike takes over, I just want to mention how his program that he's going to present fits in with this. So the TNRD administers a program funded by the Red Cross, and that we received $1 million in funding to be spent over 2018 to 2021. And this year now is in the final year of that program. So now's the time to start planning for the future. So Mike gets the good news of telling you about the free work that he can do within your community this coming year. And it just works out well timing-wise that this service that we're proposing wouldn't be established until the following year. We need to know this year whether you want to be included in the service, but the taxation wouldn't be implemented until 2022.
Just to mention, Jamie, we've got 10 more minutes left on the
okay.
Yeah, stream.
Okay, so just the final wrap up, the next steps for council is we would require a resolution showing your intent to opt into the service, so I can send a sample resolution to staff if interested. Then the TNRD board would amend the service establishment bylaw once we receive all the feedback from municipalities. And there'd be a final step of council then having a formal resolution endorsing the new service establishment bylaw, and then the expanded service would start in 2022.
Okay, thank you very much, Jamie and Colleen. Are there any questions? No?
To fit Mike into that.
Mike, you've got less than 10 minutes, so will you be able to fit into that? Okay.
Okay, so this will go, so thank you very much. We won't make a decision at tonight's meeting. It'll go to the next meeting, probably a staff report, and we'll be able to consider it then. And if we have any questions in the meantime, we can get in touch with you. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
and straight over to Mr. Deals. Mike.
Sorry for taking all your time, Mike.
No problem, Jamie. How that happened. Can you hear me okay?
Pretty quiet. A little bit quiet.
I'm raising the volume.
We're raising the volume.
Good enough. No, I didn't send the PowerPoint. I sent the PDF. If I can share screen, or Jamie, can you put it up? I can put it up. Anyway, as Jamie said, I started in Colleen's position back in 2018. Obviously, that was right after the Elephant Hill fire, and there was Red Cross was helping out landowners, et cetera, at the time. So we applied as part of the TNRD's package to Red Cross to get funding for invasive plant control. We got almost $1 million, and we have been working on that over the last couple of years. So we've gotten a fair bit done. Once Jamie gets the slide up here, I'll show you.
You're the host, Mike, so you can put it up.
Okay. There we go. We got that funding, and I moved into the role as the coordinator for this program, and Colleen moved into my old role. The budget included $400,000 for seeding and weed treatment on private lands, $350K for treatment on MODI lands, and $240 for assessing private lands, working with municipalities and First Nations. So this is a unique program in that we worked a lot on private lands. So all of that was over 3 years. In 2020, we treated most of Highway 197, did mechanical treatment for 31 different landholders. We got a little quote there from Natalie Kindig, who's up near the 97 Highway 1 junction there, and their place was burned quite heavily in the fire, and we helped them out a bit both in 2019 and 2020.
Hey, Mike, we're not seeing your screen share, I don't think.
Oh,
At least I'm not.
okay. Share screen, there we go, that'll work.
Nope, we can just see you.
There you
There
go.
we go.
There we go. Okay, got it now. And last year we asked for whether we could use the funding that we'd asked for private lands to include lands in the municipalities and First Nations. We were given the go-ahead, so we initiated a program with Clinton, and last year we did work there on 32 different private properties. So there's a picture of a truck with a lot of bags of weeds. We got started late because of COVID, but they hired a fellow who did a great job on manual control, both on roadsides within the village and on private properties, and talking to people and pulling their weeds and bagging them up and taking them to the landfill there. So the proposal that we put together is that TNRD would contract with the Village of Ashcroft to provide a service. The contract would augment the existing services that the village already performs, as Ashcroft does have a bit of a program. Ashcroft would promote the private program and have somebody do door-to-work to survey weeds and get applications. And the TNRD would help with training with plant identification and some of that contact with the private landowners and control. It would also include doing some mapping. Colleen pointed out the mapping isn't all complete. The system we call IAP is not very up to date, so this supposedly shows the weed locations, and we have an ability to get a much better map, which would really lead well into the program for the following year. This is the door hanger that we've been using, and I've gotten lots of reactions just from going around and telling people about the program and hanging that on the door when I'm seeing weeds in their area. I'm going to zip through a bit of the pictures of weeds. We also include in our program biological control, so lots of people are interested in having the bugs distributed in their area. So this is a picture near Clinton and some of the damage it does to knapweed. I'm not going to talk too much about the weeds, but some of those that we handled were Horiolisum, blueweed, spotted knapweed, of course, and a few others. And I've got a few other pictures here that I'm going to zip over. Horiolisum, we did some hand pulling there. Baby's breath is a weed that you might not consider a weed, but it's spreading worse. And I'm just going to run down here to the advantages of the program for Ashcraft. That'll be my last slide. So the advantages is that you would get free treatment on private lands within the municipality. You would get some assistance with your current work on municipal lands and roads. We can expand on outreach and education in your area and survey and enhance the biocontrols and map invasive plant infestation. So I've talked about this with village staff, and it sounds like a program that could work well for you. If you were interested, we would start further discussions. Jamie and I are talking a bit next week to see how much funding we've got left to do contract, but we would do it on a contract basis with the municipality. And I look forward to starting work with you in the spring if that's something you're interested in.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any questions from council? No? I know this was very popular in Clinton, wasn't it, Mike? It went down very well.
Yeah, they got lots of calls, and Clinton's a small town. They got to know John, who did the pulling quite well, and he knew a lot of people in the area, so it was great. And we found a lot of weed locations that I didn't know existed, including some that there's not much of, like Horiolisum. So it's very useful on both ends. Well,
as you say, I like the idea of being able to get better mapping too for the invasive species that are coming into the region overall, to, as you say, lead on from when the Elephant Hill wildfire funding runs out this year. If we join next year, then that'll be a good basis to start work with.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. And staff, I know will be preparing a report for the next council meeting, so that'll come back to us for more discussion. And again, if we have any questions, we will certainly reach out to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I guess I'll see most of you on Friday.
Thank you.
All right, have a good rest of the week, everyone.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Perfect timing, guys. 5 seconds to go.
Right on the wire.
Wow. There we go. There, my computer's down to sleep here. Never mind. Let's see. All right, so those are our delegations. We move on to public input. Are there any questions from members of the public, Mr. Smart?
At this moment, no.
No? All right, in that case, we move on to bylaws, of which there are none. And that takes us on to request for decision, item 6.1 regarding NDIT community spaces, community garden funding. What is council's pleasure on this? Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion for this staff recommendation that council endorse the Village of Ashcroft grant funding application to Northern Development Initiative Trust under the Community Spaces funding stream for the development of a community garden in the downtown core, and further that council support the project throughout its duration.
Thank you. Second, Councilor Anstead. Any discussion on this item? Very timely.
Yes?
Tight deadline.
Tight deadline.
Aren't they all? All right, well, wonderful. Great to see this advancing. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
So on the question, all those in favor? Carried. And I've circled it and put a star beside it so I don't skip over it, and that is item 6.2, the CFO report.
I'll get started. Turn on the TV again. Maybe I shouldn't have turned it off. again.
I didn't choose it.
Source. There we go. Just took a little 2 minutes to wake up. I guess it got tired after the last presentation. Okay, yeah, I'll make it bigger as I go over it. First, I'll highlight all the, so these are year-end financials. So a couple of things have happened since we looked at these numbers last, is that I've done all the year-end entries. So how I set up accounts is that you can see the project expenses going through separate accounts, but at the end of the year, because of fund accounting, it gets consolidated into one account and put into capital assets. So that shows a little bit of variance when it's actually not there, right? Because it gets moved to one account. So I'm going to select everything right now, so you can see the bottom line first. And bottom line, so I'll pull that, make that bigger, is we are balanced. It's $299. So the goal is to be as close to zero as possible. So that's where we sit. The audit is starting now, so the auditor will have some entries and there'll be some adjustments. Usually those adjustments are to capital, and we've been doing a lot of capital development in the village. So there'll be some movement of funds, but basically we're all good and we've ended the year well. So that just shows, the variance is pretty much lined up with the budget. Now, I like to go over each fund, our general operating fund starting first, revenue. So this will take a little bit of time. So, oops. And I'll maximize, let's use the graph to look at things. Okay, taxes, we were pretty much balanced. We collected 1,400 less than our budget of 1.4 million. So basically balanced. The next one is unconditional transfers for government. That had a variance of 11,000. So the larger the size of the box, the larger the budget, right? So we're focusing on the bigger ones first. The government transfers were slightly less than what we anticipated by 11,000, but basically that's balanced. Conditional transfers from other government shows a large variance, and that is because all the project funds, that year-end entry, all these project funds get consolidated here. If I click on this and go back to the numbers themselves and make this bigger, I have to do that because it doesn't show big enough otherwise on the screen. And the big is COVID recovery fund here, 674,000. And that's the COVID recovery funds coming in, hence the big green. There's a bit of red, New Deal gas tax, that was transferred for the curling club upgrades. There's a variance in the hot tub project. Well, it didn't get started yet because we're still lining up contractors. That's why there's a negative variance there. Okay, so the real negative variance, I think, was the costs in the curling club were a little bit higher during the year because we did more upgrades. We did some upgrades to the building itself to make it stable. We also had WCB orders, which add up because they ask for many different things, and that's what caused some of the variance. The other one is other transfers. There's a big variance there. Those are project funds coming in, really. So those are the biggest variances there. There's this box sales of service. Basically, we are collecting, so that has a positive variance of 92,000, and that's because we were able to open some of our facilities. We were able to collect some from the pool because we opened part of the season before things got worse and everything shut down. And a legacy park, which was a surprise, was able to operate with social distancing, and we were able to get some revenues. Please interrupt me, council, please interrupt me for questions if you have any questions about the numbers. Revenue from our own sources, we collected a bit less because we are having less operational. This is things like building rent. Senior centers closed, we're not collecting, there's some limitation, so there was a bit less. I can focus on the specific accounts. I'll do a switch again so you can see the accounts. And actually that one, the big variance is investment interest. That's really small. I'll make it bigger. I'm looking at two screens here, so it looks fine on my computer in front of me. But the big variance there is investment interest of 24,000. Interest rates have gone down, so hence the variance. But our interest expense went down too for the loan as well, so it's partially offset. And that's the biggest variance there. Is from the collections. We anticipated 50,000, we only collected 25,000 in our various investments. The other boxes are too small to really get into, so they're not a huge portion of the budget, don't affect much, so I'm not going to get into it for the interest of time. I'll switch over to the expense side of things. In the general operating fund, recreation services has a pretty substantial surplus, 344, and I'll maximize that so you can see the actual numbers. This O&M figure is causing a bit of that. That's the actual construction. So what I was talking about at the beginning, that I line up budgets with the actual expenses. These are capital expenses. So at the end of the year, I have to take them out and put them into capital. That's why it shows a big surplus there. It's actually, we went over the 150,000, 170,000. It was more in the 240, 250,000 range for everything with the additional work. So that's what caused most of that 134. There was 172. You saw the negative in the hot tub. This is the positive side of the revenue, which we didn't receive. Oh, sorry, the expense we didn't spend. The revenue was negative. We didn't get the money. Here we didn't spend the money because the project hasn't begun yet. So this year we anticipate to get it done, and you'll see the expenses coming through. And hopefully we get to open the pool as well. So that's that side. I won't get into fiscal services just yet. Transportation services had a surplus as well, and this is operational surplus primarily. A lot of it is it's 166,000. One position, Brian's namely, was moved from transportation into administration. So there's a surplus on the transportation side and deficit on the administration side in the general government. So that's primarily that. Let's look at a next largest box, which is not got much of a variance. If you actually look at it, it's a 4,000 variance, so it's not very huge. What else? Fiscal services shows negative, huge amount, and that is, and I'll make this bigger, the numbers bigger. It's the unconditional grant for water services. So it's the grant timing in essence. It's not anything. Fiscal services is the point where we anticipated we'll finish the project. We were under budget, so we didn't get as much grant on the budget as well, which is being carried over to it's more a timing thing rather than an actual deficit in operations. So that's why it's segregated into fiscal services, because it's just the fiscal transfers and the timing of transfers. You can never anticipate project timing exactly, so there'll always be, it's also the time when we claim, and by the time the government pays us, the senior levels of government, there's a timing difference as well. So the big one here also, the big negatives, We paid off the fire truck loan, 347,000. So that's causing some of it. And 832, that the one you see apart from timing is the payment of the loan for the water treatment plant. So any questions there? So both timing as well as payment of our loans. So the payment of the loans always shows negative on our accounts because we're paying them off, not getting money. So that's the negative there. As much as possible, I try and match the timing, so that is minimized. So the main difference here is the loan payment. Okay. Back to the report. I hope I haven't lost most of you yet, but please interrupt and fire off questions. So that was general operating fund. Overall, we've ended up. The expense shows a negative 735. The revenue shows a positive 735. The negative was from paying the loans. The positive was from getting money from our surplus to pay the loans. So overall, we're good. Operationally, we were well balanced. Okay, so sewer operating fund. And I'm going to drill down to this particular account, sewage collection and disposal. So it shows a big surplus. It's a big part of it. It shows various of 1.5 million approximately. So better drill down and show you what's causing this. So distribution services is showing a surplus of 1.38 million. That's the lift station upgrade, which hasn't happened yet. So we budgeted for it. It's starting this year. So all the budget and the variance. So there's a revenue equivalent variance and an expense equivalent because we didn't end up getting the project done. That's why it's showing the huge variance here. Apart from that, if you take that out, we are balanced, and I'll actually exclude it so that we can see. So overall, it says negative 131,000 as a bottom line. Of that, transfer to capital is 106, and transfer to future reserves is 75,000. So net, taking that, we're a bit positive in the tune of about 70,000. Okay. It's harder to explain at the year end because all the transfers are going into capital, but in essence we are balanced. And so revenue will again show a surplus of revenue. So revenue deficit surplus in the expense side. So here's the revenue deficit of 1.3, which I was talking about, offsetting each other. Lots of projects. It's hard to show you operational accounts when projects, our operations are 1 million and projects are 10 million. So they offset the movements from the project, offset the actual operational. Water operating fund revenue shows a $1 million surplus from the grant coming in for the water. The expense side, and I can click on, I better go drill up here because I've gone all the way down. The expense side shows a deficit of 1 million. So again, the water treatment plant, there is one area I want to focus on, the water treatment plant, and I'll drill into it. And that is, and I'll also do a PowerPoint after this, and so you can see it better. Let me just focus. And here's the two areas I want to focus on. And you see the big negative in the supply services, 61,000. And this is the operational deficit I want to talk about. If you see, the biggest items are here: water pumping costs, 46,000 negative, and water treatment plant, hydro, 62,000 negative. These are areas where we are being stretched. And I'll just explain why this resulted. But hydro costs have gone up in itself, but our usage and our challenges last year have contributed to this. So it's quite the variance, and I'll be talking more about it. That in essence is main highlights of the financials. I had a bit of trending here, but I'm going to skip that for the time being. I think a little bit of a financial overload here. So I'm going to go into the PowerPoint and talk about that in a little bit of detail. Okay, so the financial review, the primary thing is what do hydro costs, what's driving the change. Okay, first, want to talk about our insurance. I mentioned it last week. We were trying to get insurance renegotiated. Fair bit of work. Thank you for Brian and Daniela for the support while I did this. Received quotes from MIA, and we were able to save $53,000 over our bill. And that is considering that we have taken supplementary legal coverage. Let's make it into a presentation so it's bigger. So we've taken up, my screen is showing something else. There we go. Supplementary legal coverage, so we can talk to them about legal issues, and we currently spend fair bit of money, not fair bit, some money, talking to lawyers, and they charge us by the hour when we have questions. This is part of our MI service, which can help us on specific questions, sometimes about projects and legal question thereupon. And it's a really useful service. We've also taken a 90% co-insurance requirement, which was there. We've eliminated that. There's no policy aggregates versus we had aggregates for flood, earthquake, and sewer backup. So, that's a huge benefit right there. We have appraisal required, which we need to do, but we have a risk management grant of $13,981. I like the one at the end, which we can access to get offset some of that cost. So as part of this insurance, we require all our assets to be appraised. So part of my work was, while we were applying for it, sat down with Brian and bugged him quite a bit, was to get the individual values of what's there and what we think is the current replacement cost. So that helped us kind of narrow things down, remove duplication. An example would be in the heritage park, we have that train caboose. That was insured for but really, if you think about it, if something happens to it, you're not going to replace it. I mean, what will happen to a hunk of metal? It'll be hard to damage that thing in the first place, even if you tried. But if it did, we would really not replace it. It's a gift to us. Mm-hmm. So that was removed from the insurance, right? So it just doesn't make sense to pay, taxpayers' dollars for something which we would not. And we also have a 1.5 million construction coverage, which is excellent timing because we're doing a ton of construction, right? So, okay, back to the water issue. So our consumption has gone up 14% in 2020, and there are multiple reasons. A lot of reasons were people were home from COVID, so they were doing more gardening. Yeah. More water was being consumed, and people had other things on their mind rather than water conservation. We do need to get back to looking at water conservation because a 14% increase has to be captured somewhere. And you're seeing those hydro bump ups, it costs us real money, and if this consumption keeps going, we'll have to raise rates again. And that's the last thing. Now this year is the last increase we finished our water increases. This was the last year for an increase for sewer. So net increase isn't that big this year, and our seniors level was not there anymore. So we really need to focus on managing consumption, and we're going to have to think about what we can do to educate. Personally, I'm not in favor of metering because that's a huge overhead in terms of how it's administered, who takes the readings. It's a lot of overhead. If we can get that from education, That's the best way to approach it. We might be at some point mandated for meters if our consumption keeps going up. That's the other thing. The upper levels of government might say, thou shalt, and we'd have to capture that cost. I'm hoping that we can get back into operations, better operations and conservation this coming year and not have that bigger increase. And we're trying to absorb as much as we can, but as you could see, the hydro cost, one had gone up by 60,000, the other one had gone up by 40. And there's a direct, that's just the variable cost, not to mention the wear and tear on the equipment as we pump so much more. Okay, we also had some systematic issues while getting the treatment plant going. This is where our savings on the project have come useful. There was a lot of sand which came in last year in the muddy waters. For the longest time, we've seen like rolling mud in the river. That caused frequent cycles, cleaning cycles on our plant, which means more frequent pumping, which means more energy consumption, which means sudden increases in consumption, which power factors, which cause hydro to charge us even more, and additional pumping input to keep things going. So that has, and then there is the question of hydro billing, which is inconsistent. They send us 2 months sometimes, and last year I saw one with 5 months altogether as a bill for 40,000. 40-odd thousand. So billing isn't very consistent on that end, and so we have to manage it better, and that kind of leads to other ideas we're having, because we've been trying to think how we can, which means thinking about our solar plant is effective. It's inputting some power in there. Can we increase it? Can we somehow start monitoring it? Right now we don't know exactly how much it generates. Maybe we need to put a monitoring station and see what it generates. Because hydro costs are, not only our consumption is increasing, the costs are going up 5-7% every year. So this is causing a difficulty in trying to balance our budget and keeping things low. Okay, I went into mitigation without the slide. Focus on water conservation, public education. Otherwise, meters will be mandated. And if meters are mandated, it's a whole overhead of running it. Tracking solar and consumption amounts, I think that's it's an interesting out of the box thinking for us to maybe look at, less reliance on hydropower, more reliance on our own. We get a fair bit of sun here. So is there a potential to expand? I think the first step of that is monitoring exactly how much is being generated. That's the end of it. So I think on a mile a minute. Any questions or comments?
I like the idea about measuring what the solar array at the water treatment plant is generating. Because I have had questions about that. I had questions when we opened it. People said, wow, are you going to be able to find out how much that is contributing or how much it's cutting down on your bills? And I said, I don't know. And I'd like to be able to answer that question. And it would be a good starting point for, do we think that more solar is the answer? So until we know how much that is saving us, we can't really talk about expanding. Councillor Toohey.
Thank you, Mayor Roden. Yes, because I've had conversations with people, because I've been explaining to them about the hydro poles and the lights going up and how much they're charging us for that. And that was another thing people asked about, was what about solar? I have no idea. But I mean, if we can look at all kinds of ideas about how we can, make the hydro cheaper and use what we have. I mean, we're the sunniest place in Canada, I think.
How are we doing for time? I wanted to show a little bit more, but maybe I'll. Fair bit of work has happened on the mapping system and the asset management system. I'll take only 2 more minutes to show that, and then I won't spend too much time. So let's see how fast the internet is, whether it'll let me down. Okay, so what we've done is I watched some of the commercial vendors presenting and borrowed, I shouldn't say borrowed, implemented our own solution to things. One of the things that we've done is, you've seen this map before. For example, I'll map the potable water. What I've added is a whole menu system on the side, and that particularly allows the public works crew to add stuff and edit assets. So basically, taking a GIS system, which you currently required a big system we have for GIS, open source, and putting it on a web system, so the crew can add. What we want to do this next year is add service lines, which the community asks us about. Where is the service line? All of that, get that information in. So I've given the ability to add. Now, we're at we've applied for $50,000 grant to offset some of our time and my time, and we haven't gotten that because things are slowed down on the federal level. So hoping that gets, and that's what's stalling us to go forward. So this is set up. As soon as there's approval, I can start counting the time spent. So at that point, we'll start adding service lines. But the mechanism over the holidays, I worked to set it up so it's in place, which lets not only the public works staff add stuff, but there is also verification methodology there, which lets me verify whether the financial information is appropriately added. So there'll be training involved in this system, and you can, for example, if I say edit asset and I want to add a new asset, I can always add new geometry, and a whole geometric thing pops up, and they can add pipes, and this gets all saved in a centralized database. And once they've added the geometry, then I add financial bit. So if you bought a pipe, how much did it cost, or all of that stuff. And then Brian gets to approve it, whereas that's thumbs up sign there. And that's a approval screen, and he has to approve it. So there's a audit mechanism which lets you make sure the information is correct, because last thing you want is wrong information going in for the public. So this is set up. This can also be used for the tree inventory, but the public works will, when we reach that point, they'll have information about trees and they can add that. So to show you, for example, this lets you add. So this is how you'd be adding the different trees, right? And putting information. Once you have added that, you can add information about the tree, blah blah blah, all the information to however much you want to add. So it's flexible system which lets you record things. So that's just one of the, but the higher priority is to hopefully get the grant. It's worth $50,000, and start getting the crew to add the infrastructure things like service connections for water, service connections for sewer, improving information, correcting information, all of that. That's it for my presentations. I think I've gone a mile a minute. Any questions?
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments about CFO Bhalla's presentation?
Wonderful as always.
Yes?
Thank you.
Technology was our friend tonight. Excellent.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much for that. Move on to item 7.1. Donation request for the Ashcraft Scavenger hunt. So we have a request for a family pool pass. Councillor Anstead.
I'd like to make a motion that we support the Easter Scavenger hunt and provide a season's family pool pass for first prize.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Davenport. Any discussion on this? Councillor Toohey.
Well, thank you, Mayor Roden. I'm wondering if we can add a couple of individual ones or some cards.
We're going to come to that.
Okay.
It's an Easter surprise.
Ah.
I just wanted to do it as two separate, just to
Yep, no
not muddy
problem.
the waters. So.
Yep.
So any discussion on the pool pass? I know it was very gratefully received by the Lasky family last year who won it. Yes, they were very happy. So all in favor? Carried. And as a subsequent follow-up motion to this item, I would like to propose that the Village of Ashcroft provide $200 out of our public relations fund to the organizers of the scavenger hunt to buy an array of prizes. Councillor Toohey would
I
like
would
to
like to
second that. Okay, that's a surprise. Last year, the village did provide some funding, and we actually, CEO Dick went and cleaned out fields. And the organizers were very, very pleased because it meant that everyone who participated got a prize.
And the kids loved it.
The kids loved it, the grown-ups who took part loved it. I provided a Purdy's basket and for the winning, and it ended up going to the winning grown-up couple. We had 5 pairs of adults who decided to do it. So in discussion with staff, we thought that this year, we do have a public relations fund that we usually use to fund things like the community barbecue, which we almost certainly will not be able to have this year again. So instead of someone going out and guessing what they want, I thought that by providing the funding to them, they could go and get, whether it's toys for some of the kids or whether it's chocolates or whatever. So
Awesome idea.
that's the thinking behind that. They're hoping to expand it this year, go from 5 places in a given neighborhood of Ashcroft to 10 in each. So they're looking for businesses.
I already know all about it.
That might want to take part, or homeowners, and it doesn't have to be elaborate, and the organizers have a list of suggestions for how you can decorate your yard. So, any further discussion
No, great.
on the question then? All those in favor? Carried. Item 7.2, request for street art in the round. And do we have a present, or is the presentation in here? You had to take
I
pictures.
turned it off.
He just turned me up again.
Forgot about it.
There is a small YouTube video that the Kathleen sent along.
Cold coffee.
I like cold coffee.
Oh, well, I expect it to be cold.
Oh. One of these, keeps it hot.
No, but I'm still expecting it to retain some heat.
My apologies, I forgot about this. Shut it down.
She never gets anywhere.
No, she's always in the same place.
Feels like being a,
It's a giant treadmill, it's not a beach.
I think that's in Oregon, isn't it?
Probably,
I think I've been there. Not running.
I'm looking for your,
It's further down. I think I sent it to you earlier today.
okay.
That's it.
There it is. Up, up.
I think. Nope, that's not it.
Oh, that's good.
That says the
Up a bit.
capital. Oh,
That one, yeah. I tried to click on it, mine didn't work.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kathleen Kanasowicz. I run a small business called Soul Circle Mandelas. I've been working as a Mandela art facilitator and art teacher for many years. And right now I have been working in cooperation with the Elizabeth Fry Society on a big idea for some outdoor art, some community building, and some self-esteem building during this time. So we have a plan to work with a group of their people, 2 groups of their people, a vulnerable secular society and some members from the Ashcraft Indian Band. We would be creating about 30 by 30 size art in the circle. They could be flowers, they could be First Nations designs, they could be just beautiful expressions of art during the times that we are living in. And so I've sent you a PowerPoint presentation created on Canva without a voiceover, so I'm sending this as an attachment to that in a YouTube video. And so you can put a face to the request. So what I'm requesting from the Ashcraft Council today is permission to hang that art on the fence. So we're going to get about 3 of these art pieces out of an 8-foot piece. And so imagine in about 8 feet of the fence, we're having 3 to 4 of these art pieces attached to the fence with good quality zip straps. And so the materials that are going to be used for the art are going to have high quality to them, good outdoor paint, good sealer. So they're going to hold up well in the weather that we experience in that area. And so you have some pictures there. If you want me to come and meet you and go over the idea with you, I can do that. It can be reached at 250-458-2489. I think that's also in my letter attached. So we would have the art hanging on the outside of the fence, a beautification, self-esteem building. What I need from you today is permission to hang that art. With that permission, then I will move forward and make my applications with the Arts Council of British Columbia, with the Vancouver Foundation, and see what the participation may be financially from other organizations that I will be working with. And so it's now the beginning of February 2021. This project will not begin to have items actually posted on the wall until late June, early July. So the project would start about then. Depending on the weather, we would be working outdoors with all the COVID-19 protocols in place and finish by the end of September. So we're looking at that window of opportunity to actually work outside. And so your permission is what I'm looking for today. And that's everything. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
I almost wanted to say thank you there to her.
Yeah.
No.
Real.
All right.
Oh no, it went to the next video. My.
Whoa. Very dramatic.
At least it wasn't an inappropriate video.
Yeah.
Examples of the artwork, Your Worship, are attached to
Mhm.
some print screenshots of the Canada presentation.
So I'd like to move that we give Ms. Kanasevich permission to hang the art on the fence at the back of the Eat Society office. Councillor Anderson, thank you. Discussion. And first of all, Director Benowith, I'm assuming there are no objections from a Public Works point of view to site, to clearances or sites or sight lines or anything?
Sight lines probably won't be much of an issue, Your Worship, but it's just, liability, stuff like that, it has to be in consideration. And ongoing maintenance, what will happen in future for maintenance, etc.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson?
And that also is my concern, because we did talk about an art policy, and I think that's something we do need to look at pretty soon, because there is that long-term maintenance, when if it breaks down, we're already having some of those issues in the park, right? So we gotta get something in place.
Well, I know the ones that they have outside the hub. They were done 10 years ago now, because I know my son did one of them, and he dated it 2011. And I know that occasionally some of them do come off because they were painted on wood. I mean, they have proved to be quite durable, considering that they were probably not designed to last forever. But I agree the necessity for a public art policy to guide this sort of installation is going to be needed going forward. And on CEO Dick, I think you wanted to speak to that?
It'll probably more likely be on your next agenda.
Okay.
Public art policy, the draft.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson?
But having said all that, it's exciting to see the art going up in the community. I think that it's, it's a real compliment to the community, and our community's changed from being more of a Western town, when the rodeo day stopped, and now it's more into an artistic kind of community. So, I embrace that, of course, being an artist myself, but I think it's a great thing having the color, and it's, energy that comes from art. So.
Well, and we started with the murals of various buildings, and then we expanded to the mosaics, and now this is another type of art. And it is, I mean, there, a lot of people do go around the back of that
Oh,
building
they
with a
do.
thrift
Yeah.
store, I mean, so
Yeah.
to liven that up. Where you are building now, there was, after one of our wellness festivals, there was, a labyrinth put on there with
Mhm.
stones that people had painted,
Okay.
which was quite nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Councillor Davenport?
Thank you, Maroon. I'm inspired by this project and support it thoroughly. And it's important to have the outlet for people in these times. And art is one of those creative processes that works through the difficulty of depression and anxiety. And there's certainly lots of that going on in these
Yes.
days. So I applaud Kathleen and the project and the Elizabeth Fry Society. I think this is a great project, and echoing what Council Anderson said about the art in our community. I remember the branding process was either, you know, artistic communities or wellness awaits you. We're toe in toe with wellness. And so, you know, like everything else, art actually is about wellness. So, art and music and so on. So I'm excited about this project. It's very, very good.
Great. Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, on the question, all those in favor?
Yeah.
Carried. And we do have the new item 7.3 under correspondence, and that is the letter from TELUS, which you have on your desk, asking us for a letter of support for an application that is due on the 15th of February. So, I would like to move that we write a letter of support for this project, as per the attached letter about universal broadband. Councillor Anstett seconds that. Any discussion? Nope. All those in favor? Carried. Great. And I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the correspondence for information.
Second.
Councillor Tui seconds that. Any discussion on any of the items? Great to see the facade improvement back
Yes.
again. I'm assuming this is for 50% funding, not 100% this year.
At this point, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did it change in 2020?
I think it was like March, April, in the spring.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. We move on to the task manager. Any comments on the task manager from CAO Dick? Hey, nice to see that sea of green.
Nice try.
And just about the outdoor burning bylaw, it was interesting to note on Thursday night for the community consultation for SB 74, I counted 35 boxes of participants. 10 of those were trustees or school district staff, so that takes it down to 25. A couple of those boxes had 2 or 3 people in them, so that was 30 members of the public taking part. If it was not COVID time, I would not have been surprised to see that doubled,
Yeah.
if not trebled, at a proper in-person community hall type meeting. So I think that we are making the right decision in putting this on hold until such time as we can hold in-person meetings, because a lot of people are uncomfortable with the Zoom technology, they don't understand it, they don't have the internet access, they don't want to download the Zoom app or whatever you have to do to get it, they just are not comfortable with it, they don't wanna take part in that way. So the burning bylaw is going to involve a lot of discussion and a lot of passions. So I think that we would be doing people a disservice if we did not allow them to have a proper public meeting about it. Councillor Tui.
Thank you, Mayor Roden. Yes, I attended that meeting and I agree. I was impressed that there was as many as there were, but also disappointed, knowing that it was a public meeting and hoping there would be more, because it was of great concern. I agree. If we postpone this, and even then, if we have a public meeting, and now that we do know about Zoom, because some people just don't like to come out, but at least they would have that option. because I know I'm attending a meeting tomorrow that I'm choosing to Zoom rather than go there, which I can go there, but I've been away a lot, so I wanna do it from my home tomorrow. So I think that way, we may even increase our participation once we can have it a public meeting, a true public meeting.
Right.
So I'm totally in agreement with you to keep this on hold for now.
Okay, thank you. So, move to receive and file the task manager, second by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Carried. We have no new business, no reports, recommendations from anything, and I have a fairly short report. Anyone have any questions on that? No?
No.
All right. Seeing no other business, motion to adjourn this meeting. Councillor Anderson seconds. All those in favor?